Hey, this is Joe Ken for BigHousePower.com, and you are inside the house. On today's episode, we're going to discuss exercise technique, and specifically a variation of the front squat that I think is tremendously advantageous for athletes, and that is front squat utilizing the safety squat bar. A little bit of history on the safety squat bar. The safety squat bar was first introduced to the strength world by Dr. Fred Hatfield, aka Dr. Squat, one of the first athletes to ever squat over 1,000 pounds in competition at the Hawaii World Record Breakers in the late 80s. And he developed a bar that actually had a yoke. So it's a U-shaped yoke, padded, that fit across your back and over your shoulders. And he utilized this as a supplemental lift to the back squat. When it was first introduced, it was primarily used with using your arms to assist the load. And I think that's why most people were able to do more than their traditional back squat, because actually I believe the arms, which you grabbed onto a rack or you had weight pegs that were attached to the rack that you utilized, and your arms were supported by that, and you could literally, and I did that, you could pull with your arms to help yourself utilize more load. Whether that was right or wrong, I'm not sure, but what we had found out was through communication with other lifters and what you were hearing throughout the strength world was a lot of people started to get some shoulder issues because of this. And a lot of that was based off of where do you set the peg. If the peg was too high, put a tremendous amount of stress on the shoulders. If the peg was too low, you could get caught up in a good morning type of finishing of the squat. The next big thing with the safety squat bar, I think, was the introduction of the conjugated periodization model that Coach Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell brought, because now there was all types of variations of utilizing the safety squat bar, not just for squatting, good mornings, deadlifts, etc. The typical ways that I've used the safety squat bar with my athletes was either what we would call freehand, which was a non-supported arm action, but you actually held the yoke here, or hands free, where you counterbalance and had your arms out in front. And again, I was introduced to this bar probably in the mid-90s. I want to say that's about the time that Dr. Hatfield had brought this to the attention of the strength world. It could have been earlier than that. I know in the mid-90s at Boise State was the first time we had seen this bar. And I used it as a supplemental lift for athletes coming off of shoulder surgeries where they could not get into external rotation with the back squat, when at that point in time in my training, the back squat was the king. I had not really transitioned into utilizing the front squat that much. And now with the front squat being such a precedent in our training, it was very interesting to see the transition of utilizing this bar as a front squat variation. And I think the first time I saw that was in 2004. I'm not really sure if it was at Arizona State and who introduced it to me. And I just put it on the back burner because at that time we were still teaching our athletes, or attempting to teach our athletes, to use a clean grip front squat with a barbell. And if you train traditionally larger athletes, especially offense and defensive linemen who are very girthy up top, and they primarily will have wrist flexibility issues, shoulder flexibility or mobility issues, tight triceps, tight pecs, too big a chest, it's very hard for them to rack a clean or rack a properly clean grip front squat. So the variation at that time to use was something that Charles Poliquin introduced to us, and that was utilizing wrist straps, where you would take the strap, loop it through the hole, choke it on the bar, and then you could set your hands higher and still use the barbell and rack it properly across the upper chest, shoulders, and clavicles in a proper position to get the type of unique posture positions that the front squat brings compared to the back squat. Well, that there's pluses and minuses to that. The great thing about training athletes versus a lifting athlete such as a power lifter or an Olympic lifter in this case is you can find variations and be able to adapt the same type of gains in a more efficient manner. And that's what I believe the safety squat bar with the front squat variation has done for our athletes. It's a tremendously user-friendly and comfortable position. And what that means is the athlete has less to worry about or concentrate on in getting in an upper body position that may not be conducive to their limitations. This puts everybody on an equal playing field when you rack the bar properly. Now the setup is slightly different than a front squat, but you get the same postural loads that you would from a traditional front squat. You're going to be much upright in the posture, which is very, very conducive to athletic-based strength training, in my opinion, as it is related to the athletic position, which ties into a lot of things. Proper starting mechanics for sprinting, proper starting mechanics for jumping. So I think there's a lot of merit in that, in getting an athlete in a proper position, utilizing a squat to build lower body strength and hopefully transfer into athleticism. So that's the big reason why we have seen this jump exponentially up our lower body exercise pool to a point where with our, what we call our front seven interior line and our front seven level 2 guys, which are fullbacks, linebackers, and tight ends, this is our foundation lower body exercise now. We have seen, regardless of rookie to an older veteran with 9-10 years, it's very user-friendly, it's very comfortable. Our guys are very, very taken to it. If I was at the college level, this would replace front squatting, would replace back squatting as a tier 1 exercise. And again, I think there's a lot of merit to that when you're looking at variations of exercises that put athletes in a more efficient posture and technique position to succeed at the lift. Because their number one trait is their skill for their sport. We're trying to enhance those skills. So what's better than finding exercises and variations of those exercises that will allow them to enhance their abilities? A couple of things as we go on, which you'll see on this tape, is actually one of my training sessions. And how we would train a typical squat session is we will have preparation progression sets, and then we'll have the work sets. So we'll actually go through that and we'll have a brief technique session. This is not about regressions like how do we get to the safety squat bar front squat variation, but we do bring in one particular exercise that really helps with the upper body setup, because the one thing I noticed with the safety squat bar front squat variation is the rack is different than the barbell. You will not have your elbows in that high position as you would the barbell. You're actually going to set them down so you can lock your lats and really embrace your core. And that's because the pad does a lot of the work for you as far as setting the bar in proper position. And we will talk about where that bar should sit in the exercise description section of this video. But I want to talk about the one exercise that I do think is very, very good to help you understand how to set up that upper body positioning, and that's the 2 kettlebell anterior loaded squat that a lot of people have utilized now in training too as an alternative and supplemental movement that I think is a tremendous exercise. We utilize that a lot with our guys also, but what I learned through my colleague Jason Bengucci, who is teaching me the technique, after months of trying to figure out why some sets felt heavier than others, because my rack was always off with the safety squat bar, so it was hard for me to relate the teaching abilities to our athletes until we could figure this out. And what you find with the double kettlebell anterior loaded front squat is when you have your kettlebells in this position here, you're really locking down into the lat. So when you hear us say you're going to have a rounded back from a horizontal standpoint, as you're rounding the lats, you're still in a vertical position in the vertical spine when you're doing the squat, but you will have a slight round because you want to lock those lats in. So that's where the 2 kettlebell squat, if you want to talk regressions, would be a perfect regression to learn specifically the upper body positioning for the safety squat bar. So in this session, you'll see us utilize in the preparation progression set, something I highly recommend is I'm a very big fan of Mark Bell's slingshot line, and in particular the hip circle. It's extremely comfortable, but it works at a movement, especially with load, that I call tractivation squatting, which a colleague of mine helped me coin this, Brandon Marcello, when we were talking about band exercises as reset and activation movements. And I showed him how I rigged up these bands, and I was trying to figure out a name for this based off what it was doing, because it was doing a great job of knee tracking with shin angle, but it was also activating my glutes, and he came up with tractivation squats. And this is what I think the hip circle does for you with actual load in a squat, whether it's a back squat or a front squat. It helps you push out the hips so you get good knee tracking, and it also helps you activate the glutes. So we highly recommend utilizing a hip circle when we're doing our preparation progression sets, which usually is 4 sets before we get to the work sets. Then when we get to the work sets, we drop that, and it really helps clean up our technical aspects of the lift. So when you see that, take a look. It's pretty cool. I like it. And our guys tend to like it because they feel that activation, and when they take it off in their work sets, you do see an advantageous position. It really makes them focus on doing things right and getting themselves in good position. And that's the biggest thing with lifting, is proper position makes a more efficient lift, and generally it's going to mean more weight, which is one of the ultimate goals, is to get athletes stronger. So without further ado, here is inside the house safety squat bar front squatting. Hope you enjoy. Okay, the setup for the safety squat bar front squat is actually the opposite of a traditional safety squat bar squat. In the traditional mode, the yoke would actually be facing away from the athlete. With the front squat, we actually have the yoke facing the athlete. And this helps for proper setup to get the bar pad to rest comfortably and snugly on the upper chest, through the shoulder region, and up into your neck. One of the things that I've found after 16 to 18 months of finding the right setup is you do not want to, and I'm going to use do not want to, think of the setup as a traditional clean grip front squat where the elbow is high. You actually want to set this bar up similar to a double kettlebell anterior loaded squat, which we will show you after this. This allows you to brace the lats, stabilize your core, or what we call the root, and allow you to have a proper setup. The one thing I will talk to you about is, though in the descent, I don't mind if the elbows float, as long as the setup is locked in at the start. You should have a very good comfortable position that allows you to remain upright. So the first thing we want to talk about is how we're going to get into this bar. What we're going to do is we're going to take the yoke and we're going to push it up as high as we can. As the load gets heavier, this will decrease. Then we're going to walk into it here, and what we're looking to do is be snug. You have to have this bar up tight into the upper chest, slightly touching the neck, across the shoulder. You should be able to just pop it. It should be able to pop right off the rack. If it does not, it means it's too low, and this will lead to a load feeling actually heavier than what it is. So you really want to make sure you settle in. I call it digging in. Dig in so you can feel that thing popping off the rack. From there, you should be able to just pop it. And as you take your steps back, I'm going to take both thumbs and I'm going to cup underneath the pad. From here, I'm squeezing the elbows in, bracing the lats, and engaging my core. Very similar to what you would see in the double kettlebell anterior loaded front squat. Here you'll see here's the positioning, very similar to what we just saw in the setup, and double kettlebell anterior loaded front squat. Elbows are in, thumbs are touching, lats are engaged, core is engaged. From here, to just a nice easy descent, opening the hips. And again, I let the elbows open naturally. I'm not even thinking about the elbows. I'm thinking about staying locked and engaged, allowing the elbows to travel how they will. Your upper back will be slightly rounded, but if you're embraced through here and your lats and engaged hard with good rigid tension, you will remain in proper posture on the descent. So we've spoken about setup. Now let's talk about traditional squat technique once we have the bar and we have removed ourselves from the rack safely and properly. So again, I'm going to raise the yokes up. I'm going to dig myself in to find that thing jumping. I'm going to engage right from here, my lats, my core. I'm going to raise straight up. Now my thumbs are locked under the front pad. I'm going to clear the rack. I'm really now squeezing the lats tight, pulling the elbows down. I'm in proper stance. Core is engaged. I mean, I should be able to do this all day if this bar is racked right, regardless of load. So I'm locked in. From here, it is a traditional front or back squat technique. We're going to open with the hips, lead, knees out, out, proper depth, recover. If the bar is held properly, when you get to depth with this movement, you should be able to sit down here fairly relaxed and come back up easy. You're driving the chest into the pad, coming down, driving in an upright position. This movement is very similar to the traditional barbell front squat, where you cannot have a poor technical lift with the bar in an anterior loaded position. If you have a weak core root or low back and erectors, and you get into what we would call in a back squat a good morning position, where you can good morning and back it out, this bar will fall forward and you will lose it just like you would traditional front squat. I'm going to talk to you through the preparation progression sets. Generally with tier 1 exercises, we will do 4 preparation progression sets to get to the number 1 work set. During this first set, the one thing I want to talk to you about is a term we coined, which is tractivation. This was a band squat exercise that I showed my colleague Brandon Marcello, and he actually created the term, and we used a hip circle with all our preparation squat sets to help work on this. And what tractivation is a combination of knee tracking as we push the knees out, trying to keep in line with the shin and ankle, and at the same time as we push the knees out with the hip circle, we're activating the glutes. So we highly recommend utilizing some variation of a hip circle during your preparation progression sets for your squatting movements, particularly barbell bilateral. As we begin to talk about here on set 2, here's what we're talking about digging in. We get that yoke up, and again, as the yoke gets heavy, the weight gets heavier, it'll be tougher to move the yoke up, and here's the digging in process. What we are actually doing and what we're actually recommending is when you come out is only the thumb is under the pad of the yoke, and then you're in a fisted position, and as you can see, the elbows are down, we've locked the lats in, and I let the elbows freely move without even thinking about them rotating up or down, as long as I have my lats locked in. Now the back, the vertical back will be arched. The horizontal back where the lats are will be slightly rounded based off the way you have to lock this bar in. Again, digging in is critical. This will set it all up. If that front pad is low on your chest, the weight will feel tremendously heavier than it actually is and will pull you forward. You will miss the lift. Traditional squat form takes over. Lead with the hips, push the knees out, get to the depth you're looking for, drive the chest hard into the yoke, trying to accelerate out of the bottom as fast as possible. We always talk about maximum concentric acceleration. As you'll see here, the weight is getting heavier, a little bit tougher to get into the yoke. You have to be ready for that. And it may get a little bit uncomfortable when the weight gets super heavy, where that yoke may come down a little harder on your shoulders. Be prepared for that. Good trace, get to depth, drive that chest hard into the bar. Use the hip circle to its advantage, pushing out. Tractivation, key work.